He screamed. He ordered her to abort. She agreed. She marked the date. But when he arrived at the clinic, filled with regret, she was already leaving. "It's over," she said, without looking back. "You don't have to worry anymore." 8 months later, he saw her belly, and he understood everything. She never aborted. She only severed him from the story. And now, would it be too late? The price of silence, a second chance at love. What keeps a man by a woman's side isn't love, it's obligation. That phrase was uttered with the casualness of someone spreading butter on toast. It was a Tuesday night, warm and unremarkable, like most nights in that silent house, where only the clinking of cutlery and the creak of the rocking chair on the terrace could be heard. Robert Sterling's father delivered the pronouncement between sips of beer and bites of meat, without even looking at his son. And it was there, at that table, swallowed by the darkness of the living room, that Robert understood, or perhaps merely accepted, that he was living a life he never chose. Rose, sitting opposite him, didn't even look up. She was used to heavy phrases spoken in a mild voice. Those words didn't wound her as they might have. They hurt, yes, but she had already grown a callus. She just spread butter on her toast, eyes downcast, and wondered why she kept trying. They married young. The villagers said they were in love. Some even bet it would be one of those eternal loves that defy desert winds. But those who truly knew Robert, and perhaps even he himself wasn't on that list, knew he only married because his father decided it was time. Because Rose was a good girl, from decent folk, with always clean hands and eyes too sweet to say no. The problem was, Rose loved him. Truly. Not the soap opera kind of love, but the kind where you love just because you don't know how to live any other way. She loved his silences, his contained manners, even the flaws everyone criticized. She believed that, with time, his heart would awaken. But time doesn't awaken anything that's locked. Robert, for his part, never knew what to do with Rose's love. He felt it was too much, that it suffocated him. And he also felt guilt, not for not loving her, but because she didn't seem to notice. When Rose smiled and said, "I made you cinnamon coffee, just how you like it," he felt a knot in his stomach. He wanted to thank her, but he couldn't. He wanted to smile, but his mouth seemed made of stone. His love lived in the past, in a name he kept under his tongue, like a secret that burned. He never had the courage to tell Rose, not because she needed to hear it. She knew. Women always know. But she preferred to pretend otherwise. The house they lived in was simple, built with the hands of both their fathers. It had exposed brick walls, smelled of firewood, and had windows that let the mountain wind in. But what blew inside wasn't a breeze, it was absence. Rose moved around the house like someone dancing alone. She tended the plants in the courtyard, hung sheets that smelled of soap, and wrote little notes she hid in the pockets of his shirts. Silly notes, like "Today I dreamed of us on the beach," or "You smiled in your sleep last night." He read them. He kept them. But he never replied. In the village, they said he was cold. She said he was just tired, that someday he would wake up different. But days passed, and he didn't wake up. During a rainy night, everything almost changed. Rose had a high fever. She trembled and sweated, her eyes lost, her body fragile as a wet rag. Robert ran to the village pharmacy, soaked to the bone. He returned with medicine, warm towels, and a desperate silence. He spent the night by her side, changing compresses, adjusting the blanket, murmuring things he didn't even know how to say. When the fever broke, she fell asleep resting on his chest. And he didn't move. He stayed there, looking at the ceiling, with the feeling that something inside him wanted to be born. But it wasn't. The next morning, she woke up and saw him there. She smiled tenderly, wanting to capture that moment with her eyes. He simply got up and said he had to go to work. It was as if nothing had happened. But something, yes, had happened. Something small, discreet, but real. Still, the distance between them remained. A chasm without a bridge, only with attempted gestures from one side and walls from the other. Rose started talking less, stopping writing the little notes, hiding the coffee in her own sips. The silence between them grew until it became a presence. It was no longer something to avoid. It was what filled the spaces. She looked out the window, watching the tree branches dance with the wind, and wondered when she started living like this. When she stopped trying to be happy and began only to resist. Maybe the wedding day. Maybe at the first thank you he didn't say. Maybe it never even began. Robert felt the weight of expectations on his chest, like a sandbag no one could see. He blamed Rose for being there, for that house, for that role he played so badly. But deep down, he knew the problem wasn't her. It was him. It always was. It was just easier to blame than to admit it. His father said a real man swallows pain and moves on. That love is for the weak. And Robert swallowed everything. The boredom, the discomfort, the desire to disappear. He swallowed Rose. One night, he arrived later than usual. He had spent hours driving aimlessly, just to avoid coming home. Entering, he found the house dark, with a lamp on in the corner of the living room. Rose was there, sitting on the sofa, with a book on her lap that she wasn't reading. "I thought you weren't coming," she said, without anger, without reproach. "I'm here now," was all he replied, and he sat at the other end of the room. They said nothing more to each other. They just stayed there, two silent bodies, breathing slowly, as if the night could heal what love couldn't. Outside, the rain fell lightly. Inside, the emptiness was thick, dense, like a third inhabitant in that house. And so, between unspoken words, forgotten notes, and shared silences, their marriage took shape, not with promises, nor with kisses, but with pauses. Long, painful, deep pauses. Without anyone saying it, and perhaps precisely because of that, both knew. Something was about to change. They just didn't know what. Not yet. The silence between them is deafening, yet promises a storm. Have you ever felt this kind of profound, unspoken disconnect in a relationship? What would you do to break free? Share your insights in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the heartbreaking truth to unfold. That morning, the sky seemed blank, neither blue nor gray, as if the day itself had forgotten to begin. Robert left early, without saying where he was going. Rose heard the door close with that cruel lightness of someone who has already learned to leave internally long before their feet move. She stayed there, in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a different kind of silence. It was no longer the silence between them, it was the silence within her, as if her body knew before her mind that something had broken and wouldn't return. The days that followed brought disruption. He started coming home later and later. Sometimes he didn't sleep at home. Other times he returned with the scent of another's skin clinging to his clothes. Rose didn't ask. She had learned that certain answers weren't worth the bitter taste of the question, until the night he didn't even bother to hide it. They were having dinner, or trying to. 2 plates served, 2 chairs occupied, and an abyss in the middle. He dropped his fork onto the table with a dry clatter and said, "I want a divorce." Rose slowly raised her eyes, not in surprise, but like someone finally facing what she had always known. "I never loved you," he continued, without hesitation. "My heart always belonged to someone else." She remained still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just took a deep breath, trying to keep her whole body in place. Inside, the ground had opened up, but outwardly, she simply got up from the table, took her plate, and carried it to the sink. He looked at her, confused by her lack of reaction. He expected a scene. He expected guilt, but all he received was a silence that hurt more than any words. That night, Rose didn't sleep. She sat on the terrace, a blanket over her shoulders, and her feet cold. She looked at the empty street and wondered how it was possible that, even having sensed everything, it still hurt so much. 2 days later came the dizziness, the nausea, the missed period. She knew. Her body once again told her before the test did, but she took it anyway. Alone? At a pharmacy in the village center, where no one met your eyes, and everyone knew too much. Positive. She returned home with the result folded in her coat pocket. She sat on the bed, took a deep breath, and waited for him to arrive. She needed to tell him. It was the least she could do. Robert entered as always. No knock, no glance. He threw his bag in a corner and went straight to the bathroom. When he came out, Rose was standing in the center of the room. "I'm pregnant." He froze. His eyes blinked slowly, as if his brain refused to understand. "What?" "Pregnant," she repeated, her voice clear. He took a step back, almost laughing nervously. "No, it can't be." He ran a hand over his face. "You must be mistaken." "I'm not." Silence. And then, the explosion. "Abort it!" The word dropped like a punch. "I'm already out. I'm not staying for a mistake I didn't choose." She didn't move. She didn't open her eyes in surprise. She didn't plead. She just replied, "It's fine. I'll take care of it." And it was that calmness, that lack of fight, that made him sigh with relief. He thought she had understood. That this was it. That now he could leave with a clear conscience. But what he didn't see, what he never saw, was that behind that calm was something else. There was a plan. Or rather, there was something growing inside her. Something he would never understand. In the following days, Rose pretended to go on with her life. She cleaned the house, took short walks on the village paths, avoided the neighbors. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with pity. She just smiled without showing her teeth. She carried the secret like someone carrying a knife in their pocket. Cold, sharp, necessary. Robert started going out even more, and when he was home, he remained silent. He spent more time on his phone than looking at her. And still, Rose watched him. Every gesture, every doubt, every new weariness on his face. One night, they sat at the table in silence. But something hung in the air. "Have you spoken to a lawyer yet?" she asked, without looking at him. "Not yet." "But I will," he replied dryly. "When you want me to sign, let me know." He nodded, and she looked back at her plate. But she didn't eat. She just played with her food, like someone searching for something that was never there. Later, lying in bed, Rose caressed her own belly. Still flat. Still invisible. She thought about what would become of that baby. She thought about how to protect something so fragile in a world where no one held anything with both hands. She still didn't know what she was going to do. She only knew what she wasn't going to do. The next morning, while he was still asleep, she wrote something on the bathroom mirror with lipstick. "I wish you peace, even if it's not with me." And she went for a walk. In the village market, she saw a middle-aged woman with a child in her arms. He laughed, covered in flour, and hugged his mother, his feet dangling. Rose couldn't look away. She felt like crying. But she didn't. When she returned home, Robert had already left. In the kitchen, his mug was still on the counter, with traces of cold coffee. She washed it with slow, almost delicate movements, as if, by cleaning that, she could erase all that hurt. Later, she sat at the table and began to write. Not letters nor farewells. She wrote plans. She thought about routes, about names, about what it would be like to flee, not out of fear, but out of love. A love that was now only hers, and of that being growing, silently, protecting her from within. And that night, going to bed, she looked at the dark ceiling and whispered, "You don't need anyone else. I have you." And that was enough. The quiet strength of a mother. What brave steps would you take to protect your child from a painful past? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the continuation of this inspiring story. Across town, Robert was drinking, with friends who didn't truly know him, with women who didn't truly care for him. He laughed loudly, as if the world was simple, as if everything was fine. But deep down, there was something strange, an echo, an unease, an emptiness that no drink could fill. He didn't know, yet, that the biggest lie of the whole story was about to begin. And that, for the first time in his life, Rose was not the victim. She was the author. And like any author of a story she no longer wanted to live, Rose picked up an invisible pen and began to rewrite her destiny with trembling but firm hands. The next dawn, before the first rooster crowed, she left the village without a sound. She carried a small suitcase, the test results hidden among cotton clothes, and the last photograph of their marriage, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of what would never be again. The bus departed, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Rose didn't look back, not out of strength, but out of exhaustion. Behind her lay a house where love never truly entered. Through the bus's misty window, she saw the outlines of the hills fading into the fog, as if the world she left behind was gradually erasing itself. Her destination was San Jeronimo, Tlacochahuaya, a forgotten village nestled among the dry hills of Oaxaca, Mexico. That's where Doña Mercedes, her maternal grandmother, lived. A woman with small eyes and a firm voice, whose face bore every lived year as a seal of wisdom. Rose didn't announce her arrival. She just appeared. When Doña Mercedes opened the door, she said nothing. She just looked at her granddaughter, her eyes swollen and silence clinging to her skin, and understood everything. She let her in, pointed to the bed in the back room, and went back to sewing as if it were any other day. Because women like her didn't make a scene. They offered refuge. The first day passed without questions. The second too. Only on the third, while they were separating corn for the chickens, her grandmother said, "If you're hungry, eat. If you want to cry, cry, but don't live with all that locked inside." Rose bit her lips. She didn't reply. She kept shelling corn until her fingers burned. It was easier to feel pain in her body than to speak. Time in that village had a different rhythm. There was no internet, no rush, no uncomfortable glances. Only dry earth, thick wind, and barefoot children running on dirt roads. Rose started dressing like the local women, wide skirts, cotton blouses, and her hair always tied back. It was an attempt to disappear. At the small health center, a soft-voiced nurse listened to the baby's heartbeat for the first time. Rose closed her eyes. It was a dull drum, strong, non-negotiable. She cried silently, her head resting on the worn sheet of the examination table. Not out of sadness, but because in that sound there was life, and she needed to start over. The lie came from the mouth of a curious neighbor. "You look like you've been a mother." Rose hesitated, but replied, "I was, but I lost it." The lie hurt, but it also protected. The news spread quickly. Soon everyone believed she was there recovering from a loss. And yes, she was. Just not the one they thought. In the days that followed, Rose helped her grandmother with the sewing, tended the plants, and read books that had been gathering dust on the shelves for years. She wrote letters she never sent, jotted down possible names for the baby, and practiced smiles in front of the mirror. She was relearning how to exist. At night, on the terrace, with her feet on an old cushion, she listened to her grandmother murmur prayers and felt that, perhaps for the first time, she was safe. "You don't need to run," Doña Mercedes said one of those nights, sewing a sky-blue blanket with infinite patience. "But you can't hide forever either." Rose looked down, hugging her discreetly growing belly. "I'm not hiding. I'm waiting to be strong. Strength isn't waited for, child. It's created." That phrase resonated for days. In the village, she met Letitia, a middle-aged woman with 2 children and a painful past she didn't hide. They became friends through silence, the kind who understand each other with glances and share secrets without naming them. It was Letitia who one afternoon asked directly, "If he changes, would you forgive him?" Rose didn't hesitate. Forgiving isn't the hard part. The hard part is trusting again. And that was the point. Trust isn't mended with apologies. It's glass. And broken glass isn't mended with thread. Time continued, as if trying to heal. But Rose knew there was no cure. There was choice. And she chose to move forward. Then came the day she scheduled the appointment. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to feel she had control. That she was the one deciding. The eve before, she stayed awake, her eyes lost on the ceiling, her hand on her belly. She spoke to the baby without words, only with thought. It was as if she were saying, "If you're going to be born into a world where no one wants you, it's better not to be now." But her heart pounded, strong, insistent, as if saying, "I'm here, and I want you." That same night, on the other side of the city, Robert dreamed. In the dream, Rose left a white clinic, her hands stained with blood, her eyes empty, and there was a strange sound, not a scream, not silence. It was crying, a baby's cry. He woke up drenched in sweat, his chest pounding, as if he had run kilometers, and for the first time, he felt fear. Without thinking, he grabbed his car keys. He drove non-stop, as if the wheels knew the way. He arrived at the clinic just as dawn broke. The street was empty. A cold wind blew, dragging dust. And then he saw her. Rose came out slowly, her steps heavy, her face downcast, her head bowed. He ran towards her. "Rose?" She stopped, but she didn't look at him. "It's done. I had it removed." The phrase was uttered like a blade, without hesitation, without drama. Just said. He looked at her, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. "You don't have to worry anymore." And she kept walking. He fell to his knees right there, on the dirty pavement. The world spun. Everything in him screamed no. But it was too late, or at least that's what he believed. What he never knew was that she hadn't done anything. She just decided not to share anything more with someone who never stayed. That lie was the last gesture of love, or perhaps of self-protection. Because she knew that, from that moment on, what she carried inside was only hers. And for whoever knew how to stay. A lie told for protection, a truth that cuts deeper than any blade. What would you do if you were Robert, consumed by guilt and a shocking revelation? Share your raw emotions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next chapter of this powerful story. Later, lying again in the simple bed at her grandmother's house, Rose tenderly caressed her belly. "They think you don't exist," she whispered. "But you do, and so do I." In the darkness, with her eyes still damp, she finally fell asleep. For the first time in months, without a burden. Because now, yes, she was the one writing, and no one else. And that phrase, silent on Rose's lips, now echoed in Robert's life like a sentence. He had returned home after seeing her leave the clinic, or believing she had left there with an empty womb and a shattered soul, carrying a weight he couldn't immediately name. In the first few days, he tried to act as if nothing had happened. He talked to friends, laughed at the same jokes, went out drinking. But there was something different about everything. A dull sound behind the music, a lack of taste in the drinks, an inability to laugh he couldn't explain. The house, once silent, now screamed. The objects weren't just there, they judged him. The teapot, the old curtain she washed every week, the blue blanket folded on the sofa. Everything was a reminder of what he never knew how to value. Robert walked through the rooms like someone walking through ruins, and no matter how much he tried to convince himself that he was free now, something inside him knew he had lost something greater than any freedom. He started avoiding the mirror. His own eyes accused him. There was something he didn't recognize, unease. One night, opening the bedside table drawer, looking for any sleep medicine, he found the little notes. Those that Rose left in pockets, among clothes, or stuck in notebooks. He had read them at the time, yes, but he never gave them importance. Now, every phrase was a dagger. "You smiled in your sleep last night. I watched you for hours. You seemed happy. I made cinnamon coffee. I know you prefer it strong, but today I felt you needed something sweet." And then, at the bottom of the drawer, folded in four, like someone hiding a piece of their soul, was the final note. "If you ever truly love me, I hope there's still time." He read it aloud, once, twice, 3 times, and then he broke. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a collapse. His body huddled on the floor, muffled sobs, trembling hands, a burning throat. He cried like someone who never learned, like someone who always repressed everything and could no longer. That night, he truly understood what he had done. It wasn't just about having asked for a divorce. It wasn't just about the rejected pregnancy. It was about all the days she tried, all she insisted on. And he failed. Regret didn't come as a thought. It came as a presence, a weight on his neck, an echo on the walls, a voice that repeated, "She stayed." And you left. Friends disappeared, not out of malice, but because they didn't know how to deal with what he had become. Robert was no longer the same. He didn't drink as much. He didn't laugh the same way. He had a lost look, always searching for something no one could give back. One day, he went to the park, where he used to walk with Rose. He sat on her preferred bench, the one under the large tree with rusted leaves. He stayed there for hours, watching people pass by. A young couple passed pushing a pram, and he didn't look away. He thought, that could have been me. But it wasn't. He returned home and looked at old photos. In a dusty album, an image of the two of them dancing at someone else's wedding. Rose smiled with her eyes. He was just there. Nothing more. For the first time, he noticed how he never truly smiled in photos with her. He sat on the living room floor, surrounded by albums, by notes, by memories he had previously ignored. And he had clarity. A painful one. He had lost her before realizing he had her. In the following days, he tried to call her. The number no longer worked. He called Rose's mother, who hung up without a word. He sent messages, and none were replied to. He went to her parents' house. No one answered. He learned they had sold it and moved. Rose, now, was an absence. Robert immersed himself in attempts to feign normalcy. He accepted a job at a mechanic's workshop. He spent his days between oil and grease, trying to dirty his hands so as not to dirty his soul anymore. At night, he slept on the sofa, not for comfort, but for punishment. Dreams of Rose intensified. Sometimes she looked at him in silence. Other times, she spoke with eyes full of tears. And in some, she handed him a baby and took it away before he could hold it. Loneliness became a habit, but not the kind one chooses, but the kind that is imposed. One afternoon, returning from work, he found a letter at the door. No sender, no address, just his name, written in that handwriting he knew so well. He opened it with trembling hands, but it was an old note. One she must have mistakenly left in a notebook he threw away, and which someone by chance returned. I saw you sleep last night. You were dreaming. Did your lips move? Did you say my name? I want to believe you did. He broke again. The next day, he decided to clean the house, as if he wanted to remove the scent of omission, the trace of cowardice. He threw away what he didn't need. He put the notes in a box, closed it, and hid it. But he couldn't get rid of anything that belonged to her. Even the smell of her shampoo was still on the pillow, and sometimes he would rest his face there, like someone seeking a safe place. Regret now was a body inside him. It occupied space. It spoke. It prevented him from smiling. There wasn't a single gesture of the day where Rose didn't appear as a memory. And the cruelest thing was knowing he couldn't go back, because she was no longer where he left her, and even more, perhaps she was no longer waiting for him. Robert then began to write. Not letters, because he didn't know where to send them, but loose texts, unburdens, like this one. Today I saw a woman with a child in her arms. They were laughing. I thought, that could have been you. That could have been ours. But it's not. I killed that possibility, and I'm still alive. That's the worst part. He wrote non-stop. Sometimes he read aloud, to no one. Other times, he immediately tore up the pages, as if by writing, he was trying to exorcise a ghost he himself had created. One night, he went out on foot, aimlessly. He walked through unfamiliar streets, crossed bridges, traversed avenues. He only stopped when his body could no longer. He sat on a pavement and cried again. No matter how many times he had done it, it always felt like the first. And it was there, his face in his hands, that he finally understood. It wasn't just about Rose. It was about him, the man who didn't know how to love, the child who grew up hearing that feeling was weakness, the husband who didn't learn to stay. And now, there was nowhere to hide. That dawn, returning home, he made a decision to start over. Not for her, not out of regret, but because he needed to rebuild himself from within. But the emptiness, oh, that didn't go away. Because when someone leaves, leaving love and silence in the same place, there is no cure. There is only coexistence. And that was what Robert was learning. To coexist with the love that arrived too late. The depth of Robert's regret is palpable. What do you think his next step will be on this difficult path to self-discovery? Can he ever truly find peace? Share your thoughts and hopes in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the powerful climax. Time had that cruel habit of teaching lessons when there were no more exams to take. In the months that followed, Robert changed. Not like someone seeking redemption, but like someone who finally understood what he had lost. His routine became quieter, more contained. There was no more rush, no more distractions. The workshop was the only place where his mind calmed down, hammering, tightening screws, fixing what was broken. It was ironic. He could fix anything, except his life. One afternoon, under a sky of almost sad blue and the bustling streets of Guadalajara throbbing around him, Robert walked aimlessly. He had left work early, took a different route, and ended up in a square whose name he didn't know. There was an aged fountain, stone benches, ice cream vendors, and families scattered on the dry grass. An ordinary place. But that day, it was where everything stopped. He saw her, across the street, Rose. She wore a loose blouse, but not enough to hide the belly she held, with tenderness and firmness at the same time. She walked slowly, one hand on her back, the other on her stomach. She wore a simple dress and low sandals, and her hair, tied back in a way he had never seen before. But it was her. The city kept moving. People passed by, cars honked, children laughed. But for Robert, everything went silent. The world lost its sound. Only that image existed. The woman he thought he had lost forever. And more than that, the truth she never told. The baby. He took a step, then another, and stopped. The impact was stronger than the impulse. It wasn't just surprise. It was a pang in his chest, and a regret that now had flesh, form, and movement. He felt his legs falter. He gasped for air. His eyes filled. And then he sat on the edge of the pavement without noticing, his head bowed, his elbows resting on his knees. There, between the city noise and the internal silence, he murmured, "She lied. She didn't abort. She protected me, even from that." And he cried. Again, but differently, because now there was something more than guilt. There was hope. Rose crossed the square without seeing him. She entered a bakery, bought bread, spoke with the shop assistant, smiled slightly, and left. When she passed by him again, he didn't move. He just watched her. She looked tired, but whole. There was a fierce calm in her posture, like someone who fell, but chose to get up. That night, Robert didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window, his eyes fixed on the darkness. And at some point, his mind created an image, him, with the baby in his arms. The child looked at him with deep eyes, similar to hers. And in the dream, he said, "Sorry. Not for before, but for not having been better." He woke up sweating, but with clarity, like someone receiving a mission. He needed to see her, truly, not just find her on the street, like a spectator. He needed to be in front of her, look her in the eyes, and say everything that had been stuck, even if she didn't forgive him, even if she didn't want to listen. He knew he couldn't show up empty-handed, nor with cheap words. The next morning, he asked for 2 days off. He told his boss he had to sort something personal. He took a bus to Oaxaca. He didn't know if she was still there, but it was the only thread he had. The road to San Jeronimo seemed longer than it was. Each curve of the road was a memory. Each stop, a hypothesis of what he would say. He arrived at dusk, with the sun hiding behind the mountains. The village was still simple, silent, like someone keeping secrets from everyone. He asked for Doña Mercedes. A child pointed to the house with the weathered roof. Robert stopped in front of the wooden gate. His heart pounded in his chest. He took a deep breath. He knocked and waited. The gate creaked before opening completely. It wasn't Rose who answered. It was Doña Mercedes. Her eyes, small and sharp, scanned Robert from head to toe, like someone examining a wounded animal that had returned to its native mountains. She said nothing at first. She just opened the door a little wider. "Come in?" He obeyed. With slow steps, he crossed the packed dirt courtyard where flowers grew haphazardly, but alive. There was the smell of earth, of freshly brewed coffee, and a thick silence. "Rose doesn't want you here," she said, already in the kitchen, stirring something over the fire. Robert remained standing, his hands trembling and his throat dry. "I know, but I still had to come." Doña Mercedes didn't turn around. "Why?" "Because now I understand. And I didn't come to promise anything. I just want to be here. Do whatever she allows." The old woman let out a sigh that sounded more like a tired whisper. "You want to change?" He nodded, eyes downcast. Then she put the wooden spoon on the counter, turned around, crossed her arms, and looked at him directly, with the hardness of someone who has seen too many men promise what they never kept. "Then stay, but without romance, without promises, just presence." He swallowed hard. "She doesn't need a man. She needs help, and the baby needs a father." Those words cut into him like marks, a calling, a sentence. That same night, Doña Mercedes prepared the back room. It was narrow, with a single bed and a wardrobe that smelled of old wood. But it was a beginning, and he accepted it humbly. Robert has arrived, ready to face his past. What do you think Rose's reaction will be? Can a relationship truly be rebuilt on the ashes of betrayal? Share your powerful thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the profound turning point. The next day, at 6 in the morning, he heard footsteps in the kitchen. He got up before the sun warmed the tiles and went there. Rose was with her back to him, stirring a pot with an apron stained with flour. She didn't say good morning. She didn't turn around. She just spoke, dryly. "You don't have to pretend everything's fine." "I didn't come to pretend anything," he replied, in a low voice. She continued stirring the pot. "How long are you staying?" "As long as you allow me." She stopped, took a deep breath, then resumed stirring. She said nothing else, and so it went for days, a silent, tense, but respectful coexistence. Robert began to help with small things. First, cleaning the courtyard, then going to the market, carrying bags. He tended the chicken coop, changed the water for the plants, prepared buckets of warm water when Rose's back hurt. He learned to make cinnamon tea as Doña Mercedes taught him. He observed in silence. He paid attention. One day, he saw Rose trying to reach something on a high shelf. She stretched, huffed, insisted. He approached slowly. "May I?" She hesitated, and for the first time she looked him in the eyes. "Only if you ask permission." He took a deep breath. "May I help you, Rose?" She looked away, and slowly she stepped aside. It was just a jar of flour, but for him, it was a world. Time passed. Days were long, but something was changing, though no one named it. One hot afternoon, while Doña Mercedes napped in the hammock and Rose rested with her feet on a stool, Robert wrestled with the patio faucet. The water pressure was low. Water splashed everywhere, and he muttered curses. "Damn it, just hope this garbage doesn't explode now." Rose heard him, and for the first time she let out a laugh, brief but real. He turned, surprised, and she lowered her head, like someone caught by an affection she didn't want to admit. "What was that?" he risked asking. "Nothing. It's just that you haven't changed that much." He smiled, unsure if that was good or bad, but it was a sign. In her room, on the wooden crib, there was a teddy bear, the same one from the beginning of their marriage, that he once brought without thinking, in a gesture too small for what was missing between them. Now, that teddy bear was there, a witness to a time that no longer existed. One day, while Rose was folding baby clothes, he entered slowly. "May I?" She didn't reply, but she didn't chase him away either. He approached the crib, carefully touched the teddy bear. Then he looked at her. "I wish I could go back, do everything differently." She stopped, looked at him. There were tears in her eyes, but also firmness. "But you can't." "I know, and it's no use telling me you changed. I don't want to hear it. I need to see it, feel it." He nodded. "That's what I'm trying to do." The silence between them was no longer an abyss. It was a bridge under construction. Slow, unsure, but real. Weeks passed. Robert was still there. Present, silent, firm. And Rose, little by little, began to breathe differently. Still with fear. Still with reservations. But something in her also changed, because love, sometimes, doesn't return. It is reborn. From scratch, in a different way. And no one there was in a hurry. Because broken pieces, when carefully glued, form something stronger than before, even if they never become the same again. A slow, painful, but genuine rebuilding of trust. What do you think the future holds for Robert and Rose? Will their silent efforts be enough to mend a shattered past? Share your hopes in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the breathtaking climax. In that early morning, time seemed to fall out of sync. The house was dark, and the whole world slept, except her. Rose's scream was dry, intense, and pierced the walls like muffled thunder. Robert, who had been a light sleeper since moving into the small back room, sprang from bed as if under attack. He didn't even put on his shoes. He ran through the house, his eyes burning and his heart pounding wildly. He found her hunched in the hallway, clutching her belly with both hands, drenched in cold sweat. "Rose!" he cried, approaching. "She's coming now," she murmured through clenched teeth, her voice rasped by pain. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the keys, opened the front gate, started the car with the headlights still off. Doña Mercedes was already standing too, as if she knew beforehand. She simply handed him the hospital bag, without a word. Robert ran to Rose and helped her into the car. Neither said anything. The drive to the hospital was like crossing a minefield. Potholes, rocks, curves, and in the passenger seat, the woman he once swore not to love, and who now was the only person he wanted to see breathe. "Breathe with me, Rose. Come on, take a deep breath." "I know what I have to do," she said through clenched teeth. "Just drive." And he drove, with the care of someone carrying something sacred. In the hospital, the corridors smelled of disinfectant and urgency. Doctors rushed back and forth, and he felt his legs give way as they put her in a wheelchair. "Are you the father?" they asked. He hesitated for a second, but not to think, only to let the weight of the word settle. "Yes, I am." They allowed him to enter. He stayed by her side, holding her hand tightly. She, between contractions, squeezed so hard his fingers throbbed. But he didn't let go. "Rose," he murmured. She didn't reply, but she didn't let go of him either. The hours felt like weeks. The labor was difficult, long. But at one point, the sound that filled that room was not a scream of pain. It was a small, new cry, a sharp, piercing cry, the kind of sound that is born only once and changes everything. Robert felt his legs wouldn't hold him. He had to lean against the wall. Tears came before he could stop them. It's a girl," the nurse said, emotional, as she handed him the clean baby wrapped in a blanket. Rose slowly turned her face, exhausted, depleted, but alive, and she saw when he received their daughter in his arms. Robert held her like someone holding fire, but also hope. His eyes wide, his hands trembling. She was so small, so light, so real. "Hello, little one. Hello," he whispered, his voice broken. He looked at Rose. Her eyes were filled with tears, without makeup, without armor. Just her. Human, hurting, strong. She gave a slight nod, like someone allowing, like someone recognizing something. And he understood. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A step. In the days that followed, the house changed. Silence gave way to cries, hurried footsteps, boiling water, bottles, warm cloths. Rose breastfed with attentive eyes, and Robert offered to carry the baby after each feeding. He learned to change nappies, to warm water to the right temperature, to calm cries with soft music. Doña Mercedes watched from afar. She didn't say much, but her gaze held a contained peace, like someone watching a barren field begin to bloom. One ordinary afternoon, she was sitting with the baby in her arms, cradling her carefully. The sun filtering through the window gilded her white hair. Robert and Rose were in the kitchen, separated by the table, exchanging brief glances, trying to decipher the new language emerging between them. Doña Mercedes called them with a gesture. They approached. "Now she's yours," she said bluntly, looking at the sleeping child in her lap. "What I could do, I've done. A house, a test, and love from both sides." She handed the baby to Rose delicately, like someone returning a miracle. Rose held her in her arms with almost shy affection. She looked at Robert. He said nothing. He just looked at her. In the eyes. "I still don't forgive you," Rose said, her voice firm, yet broken. "I don't expect that, but I think I want to." That phrase, spoken with eyes full of fear, but also tenderness, was the beginning of everything that could still be. He smiled. "It's okay. While I wait, I'll care." And she believed him, because there's a difference between someone who returns and someone who stays. And he was there, without promises, without speeches, just with presence. And at that moment, though no wound was completely closed, they were a family. Not perfect, but possible. A new life, a fragile hope. What do you think this shared vulnerability means for Robert and Rose's future? Can love truly be reborn after such pain? Share your raw emotions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the beautiful conclusion. Time passed with slow steps, as if it knew that haste doesn't suit reconstruction. The days in that house were no longer made of sharp silences, but of new sounds. The patter of tiny feet in the hallway, the shy laughter of a little girl beginning to explore the world, and the soft conversations between two people who, at last, were learning to listen to each other. Robert woke up early. The sun had barely stretched over the rooftops when he was already dressed, his hands rough and his lunch packed by Rose. The construction site was a half-hour walk away. It was hard work, but dignified. And for him, more than that, it was the opportunity to build something solid, both externally and internally. He returned in the afternoon, his body covered in dust and his face tanned by the sun. But upon crossing the wooden gate, he always found the same scene. Rose sitting on the terrace, with the little girl on her lap or at her feet, playing with scraps of fabric, dry leaves, and inventing stories for every new sound she learned to make. "Your bath is ready," Rose would say, without looking at him, as he took off his dirty boots. It was routine, but it wasn't automatic. It was care, a care that had been born slowly, like everything that needed to be reborn. After his bath, they would drink tea, cinnamon tea, with more sugar than he liked, but which she said helped him relax. It was in those moments that they looked into each other's eyes. They didn't talk about the past. There was no need. The important thing was what they were building. The baby, now teething and taking unsteady steps, had become the center of their universe. Each new syllable, each attempt to say mummy or daddy, was celebrated with contained joy, as if they feared fate would hear them and come to collect its due. Rose smiled more, and it was a different smile than he remembered. Before, she smiled with hope. Now, she did so with presence, the smile of someone who no longer expects anything, just lives. Robert, seeing her like this, felt a silent gratitude, not for being forgiven, but for being allowed, for being received, even without breaking the whole story, for her having chosen to stay, even though she didn't have to. Sundays were the favorite days in that house. They woke up unhurriedly. Doña Mercedes prepared bread in the wood-fired oven, and after lunch, told stories from when she was young. The little girl listened, not understanding much, but always applauding at the end. And everyone laughed. Rose sometimes looked at Robert and saw a different man. One she hadn't known before. Someone who no longer asked for forgiveness with words, but with actions. Who arrived exhausted, but still found the strength to tell a story or fix the dripping tap that had been bothering them for days. She no longer said she forgave him. But every night, as she lay down beside him, she rested her head on his chest. And that was enough. It was on one of those nights, with the little girl asleep on his lap and the warm breeze brushing the terrace, when it happened. Robert knelt, not in a rush, nor out of fear, but with a serenity that Rose had not yet seen in him. He took a small cardboard box from his pocket. Inside, a simple ring. Without stones, without sparkle, but clean, chosen with care. Paid for with days of work and nights of saving. Rose, I was an idiot. I loved you from the beginning, but I was too foolish to realize it. His voice was firm, but his gaze trembled. She looked at him without saying anything. The little girl was still asleep, breathing softly, as if everything in the world was in its place. You are my home, my courage. Will you marry me again? This time, for love. Only for love. Time stopped. Rose looked at the little girl, then at him. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from overflowing emotion. She took a long time to reply, because she knew what that yes meant. It was a new beginning, not to forget the past, but to look at it like someone remembering the path that led them here. Yes, now, yes. Robert closed his eyes for an instant, like someone breathing a sigh of relief, like someone finding shelter. At the back of the courtyard, in the shadows of the plants, Doña Mercedes watched. She didn't approach. She just smiled, a quiet smile, of someone who understands that some harvests take time, but they bloom. Now, a real family, she murmured, returning inside with a light heart. On the terrace, the moon seemed to listen to everything, and there, under a sky full of invisible witnesses, 3 lives intertwined, not with promises, but with gestures, with the weight of all that had been and the lightness of all that could still be. Love now was not a utopia. It was every day. True love doesn't always begin with promises. Sometimes it begins with falls, with silence, with wounds no one sees, but also with choices, with someone who, even after everything, decides to stay. Because to love is not to say, it is to care, it is to listen, it is to return, and to deserve to stay. And sometimes what begins with pain ends with a baby sleeping in your arms, and a heart that at last understands what it means to truly love. If you felt this story until the end, tell me you were here with me. Write in the comments, "I stayed," because whoever stays until the end understands the value of a new beginning.